There's no doubt the electric car is in the ascendancy, and nowhere is that more obvious than in the large luxury SUV sector. There have been more arrivals in this sector of the market than almost any other. Now, Tesla arguably stole a march on everyone with the Model X, but the mainstream manufacturers weren't far behind, in particular Jaguar with its I-Pace. Now, that car was launched 3 years ago, and now there's a new, refreshed one. But in that time, there have been a number of new and important rivals, particularly the Mercedes EQC, and behind me here, the Audi E-tron Sportback. So let's find out whether these updates are enough to keep the Jaguar at the top of the class. So this is the new Jaguar I-Pace. Well, I say new, it's not really new, it's an update, and it's a very mild update. So effectively, the big change is we've got a new infotainment system, so it's the Pivi Pro system, so it's much quicker acting than before, and it looks really good, it works really well, so that's good. The old system was a bit laggy. There's been some updates to the charging, so it can now do 11 kilowatt charging. Other than that, it's pretty much the same as before, which, given that it's the oldest car here, is both a bit of a surprise and also not much of a surprise, because Jaguar were the first ones to jump in with both feet to the luxury SUV EV market. They were the first legacy manufacturer to do it, and frankly they did a pretty good job. So even now the I-Pace looks distinctive, whereas the Audi and the Mercedes, they look like electrified versions of internal combustion Mercedes and Audi SUVs. This doesn't look like any other Jaguar, and it's kind of better for it. It looks modern, that kind of SUV crossover thing we're kind of well used to now, but the Jag still stands out. And the best part about it is that they haven't changed the way it drives. So we've got the least power here, not by much, 396 brake horsepower and 413 pounds-foot of torque. But crucially, whereas the other two weigh, in the Mercedes case, just a scratch under 2.5 tons, the Audi's case just over 2.5 tons, the Jaguar weighs 2.2 tons. Now that's still quite a chunk of car, but that reduction of 300 kilograms, it makes a difference. So even though it's slightly less powerful, it's the quickest car here. So Jaguar claimed 0 to 62 in 4.7, 4.8 seconds, and it feels quick. So we're cruising at 70 now, and even now, put your foot down and you get a proper kick in the back. All of these cars are quick, but this one feels the most alert to the throttle. But crucially, it's when you change direction, when you want to go through some corners, that the Jaguar, it proves that we shouldn't fear EVs necessarily. I know lots of people are claiming that EVs aren't going to give you the same sensation as internal combustion engine cars, and that is true, they don't. But the Jaguar, you really can enjoy it. The steering is so much quicker than the other two. There's eager turning, and despite that weight, it clings on really well, and there's great body control, so we can just fling it through corners. Good steering feel as well. This is an SE car, so all the cars here start at around £65,000 for the basic one. I think the cheapest Jaguar you can get is about 62, which is the S. So this is an SE, about 65,000. Now normally you get passive dampers, coil springs. This one's on air springs and adaptive dampers. Makes no difference really. The ride is slightly nicer with the air springs. I mean, it's still probably the busiest of the three, and there's more road noise, a bit more wind noise, but in terms of poise, body control, you can really throw it around and have fun. Now there's torque vectoring, it's two motors like the other two cars here, and you get four-wheel drive traction, and it can tweak the motors and on the brakes to get the car turned in quickly. And you don't feel it like some torque vectoring systems, you can feel it working away, just trying to rein the car in. This one feels so much more agile than the other two, and you can just lean on it. Oh, you can even hear a bit of tyre squeal there. I mean, it's great fun, it really is. There's an engaging nature to it, an adjustability that's missing in the other two. If you enjoy driving, and don't we all, then the I-Pace has to be at the top of your list. Now, it's not all great news, because While the range is claimed to be the longest here, 292, the Jaguar does seem to chomp through its electricity rather quicker than the other two. And that's not just down to the way it drives, or the way you drive it. Now, in fairness to it, all our cars were fully charged when we picked them up. Mercedes had around 170 miles on a claim of 255. The Audi just under 200 on a claim of 240. This one had 238 miles on the clock, claim 292. But even now, I'm watching the range here, and we're cruising, and I'm watching the miles disappear off that range almost as quickly as they're disappearing under the wheels of the car. Now, like the other two, you get rapid charging, so it's a 90 kilowatt battery in this, so it's in between the Mercedes and the Audi. 150 kilowatt charging, you can have 80% fully charged in about 40 minutes. Plug it into a wall box, a 7 kilowatt wall box, you're looking at 13 hours for a full recharge. Now, one area that really niggles is the fact that regenerative braking is available on all of them, obviously, and you get quite a high level of regenerative braking. You can effectively drive all three as one pedal car, so lift off and it just slows really quickly but smoothly, and you can almost come to a complete stop as you would with a nice gentle brake, and then back on the throttle and pick up. Now, in the Audi, in the Mercedes, paddles on the steering wheel let you quickly adjust between three different levels of regenerative braking, almost between total coasting, no braking at all, up to one pedal full on stopping. With the Jaguar, you get a choice of high engine braking or low engine braking, but you've got to go through about 3 different button presses on the touchscreen. So where are we? Quick, EV, there we go, regenerative braking, low or high. Now, I know it's personal taste. I like to drive with high regenerative braking. Some people don't like any, and I'm sure you just switch it to whichever is your preference and leave it. But sometimes, like on a motorway where regenerative braking can be irritating because every little lift you need to make results in the car slowing suddenly, brake lights going on, the person behind you inevitably tailgating you, panicking, you probably want it on low so it will coast. And so that switching between the two is just a faff, a real faff. And it's a small thing, I know it's a small thing, but the rest of the car is so good, so likeable, that you wonder why they didn't think that through. But hey ho, you get used to it, I'm sure. I mean, it's just such good fun to drive, genuinely. I mean, I do miss the internal combustion thing, but this thing, you can have a genuine hoot. And if all your journeys revolved around hacking down flowing country roads, bit of town work, and only short bits of motorway, and you wanted an EV, a luxury premium SUV EV, you'd be pretty bonkers not to choose the Jag, to be honest. So, does it come out on top? Well, it's going to be a close run thing. We need to try out the other two first. So, let's park up the Jaguar and let's have a go in the Audi. So, the Audi e-tron. So we've got the Sportback version here. There's also a standard e-tron, which is more like a standard SUV. This has got a bit of a coupe style to it. Like the Mercedes, it feels more like a normal car to look at first. They haven't had the same desire to start from such a clean sheet of paper as Jaguar have with the I-Pace. They didn't want to scare off customers, was the theory. Make it look like a standard car. People will be less scared about the high-tech internals. And for many, that will work. I mean, it does mean it's not as exciting to look at. It just looks like an Audi SUV, a very nice, handsome, premium SUV, but an Audi SUV nonetheless. That's not to say there aren't some interesting features here. Now, this is the only car here that's got these clever little cameras for rear view mirrors. So you'll see these stalks poking out on the doors, and then we've got some cameras down here, which at first take a little bit of effort to remind yourself to look down there. You are having to make a conscious look down, but once you get used to it, they work really well. And there's also a nice little bit of theatre on the outside when you plug the car into charge, rather than a normal petrol flap where you have to press and it pings open. Press a button and it slides out the way. It's real theatre. It's quite a cool, neat touch. But other than that, just looks like an Audi. And to be honest, it feels like an Audi too. Now inside, it is typically slick. I mean, we have a multitude of touchscreens here. It's overcomplicated, it's probably doing it a disservice, but compared to the Jaguar and the Mercedes, there's quite a lot going on here. We've got a touchscreen for all your infotainment, touchscreen for your climate control. I mean, it looks lovely and the materials are second to none. This is a properly nice place to spend time. Now, under the skin, like the other two cars here, we've got two electric motors. Now this is a 55, there's also a 50 with a lower powered output. This one has 402 brake horsepower and about 489 pounds-foot of torque. However, it's also the heaviest, so unbelievably, even though outside it looks a bit more compact than the other two, this thing weighs just over 2.5 tons, and as a result, on paper it's not as quick. Audi claim 0 to 62 in about 5.7 seconds, which in fairness is quick enough, and there is, like you'd expect, put your foot down and it takes off. There is no hesitation, there's so much torque, it's almost instant, and of course it's four-wheel drive, total traction. It's a quick old thing. It's also got the biggest battery here, so it's 95 kilowatt hours, which Audi claim give you a range of just over 240 miles. Now, when we got in it today, fully charged, it was around 200, so it's not bad. I mean, it is cold today, and it does seem quite stable. You know, even with a bit of a thump of the throttle, whack on the heating, you'll only drop off a couple of miles. It is quite consistent, but it's still, compared to things like the Tesla, even compared to the Jaguar with its near 300 mile range, it's not range anxiety, but you are aware that you have to keep an eye on it. Now, with 95 kilowatt hour battery, biggest one here, it also means it takes the longest to charge. So if you've got a wall box at home, 7 kilowatts, you're looking at the thick end of 14 hours to charge it. Plug it into a 150 kilowatt rapid charger, they'll all do that, and you're looking at 50 minutes to go from 10% to 80%, which is pretty good. It costs though. Now, we plugged one of these in just for a short while to get 130 miles of range through a rapid charger. It was an Ionity ones, other rapid charging networks are available, and it took about 30 quid of our cash for 130 miles, which you start to tap away your calculator, and that's not much different from a sort of petrol executive saloon for a similar mile in petrol. So charging at home, save yourself a bundle. Beware though that rapid chargers, while they will get you going again quickly, you will pay for the privilege. Rest of the car, as we say, I don't want to keep saying it feels like an Audi, but it does feel like an Audi. It is the heaviest car here, and frankly, it feels it. I mean, it's not bad to drive by any stretch of the imagination. Your standard slick, if lack of feel steering, lots of grip. Now it's riding on air springs, they're all riding on air springs here. So we can dial through the various driver modes if I can find them. It takes a little bit of while. Here we are, it's down here. It is quite confusing, this layout. So let's have a look. What have we got here? Let's go for individual. No, let's go for dynamic. Dynamic stiffens it all up. Bit of sticky weight to the steering. It feels tauter in the corners, but you are aware of that mass. Pile into a corner too quickly and you are acutely aware that physics would rather you go straight on and not turn into it. But you still have to be going fairly quickly for that to be a problem. But there's more steering angle that you have to put in compared to the Jaguar and the Mercedes. It's the least dynamic car here, but the trade-off is, particularly on the air springs, it probably just has the edge for ride comfort. It's got big old wheels on it, this thing, but even over some sharp expansion joints and potholes, there's just the merest hint of a thud as it goes over. The rest of the time it just smothers the road surface. It's perhaps not as practical as the GLC, a bit more practical than the I-Pace, a bit more space in the back, even in this Sportback, but we're talking little bits. I mean, it's a nice thing. It is. I like the mirrors, that's quite cool. And I really like the flap that opens to allow you to charge it. And that sort of worries me, that the one thing about this, the best thing about this car is the flap you open to charge it. I mean, I'm being unfair. This is a really good thing, and if you're new to EVs and you don't want to be shocked by some clean sheet design that's going, hey, we can rip up the conventions, we don't need to do engine at the front, transmission down the middle, we can basically make it triangular and have square wheels. If that scares you, and I can understand why it would, then this is a nice stepping stone. It just feels like a really nicely built, really comfy, heavy on tech Audi. It's just, I'm not sure I'd have it over the other two. Good, but not the best here, I don't think. Okay, Mercedes EQC. Have we saved the best till last? Well, a bit like the Audi, the Mercedes at first feels like the most conventional machine. As I say, but like the e-tron, they've gone for a very familiar look. This looks like a Mercedes SUV. I mean, there are some nice little touches. You'll have probably noticed on the outside you've got that LED strip across the front, but it is very much a Mercedes. You are buying, like the advert says, I drive a Mercedes. It's a Mercedes, it's not an EV, it's a Mercedes that happens to be an EV. Depending on your point of view, that's a good thing or a bad thing. Personally, it's executed really nicely. I'm not so convinced on the looks. I think it's probably the blobbiest and the heaviest looking here, even though it isn't the heaviest. Inside, as you'd expect with Mercedes, it is beautifully done. There's quite a lot of colours going on in this one. This is a AMG line premium, I think, which is somewhere over £70,000, but prices start at about £65,000 for the Sport, and it's nicely done. This thing is effortless in the way it accrues speed. It's very quiet. Wind noise, yes. Drivetrain is very quiet, and it's got the best balance of the two between agility and comfort. It doesn't ride quite as smoothly as the Audi, and it doesn't feel as nimble as the Jaguar, but it's not far off. The steering has a lovely natural rate of response, and there's decent weighting there. I mean, we can flip between the various driver modes if we want. Dynamic, again, adaptive dampers with air springs, stiffens it all up. But frankly, on a car like this, stick it in comfort and it will sort itself out. And then it's really nice and wafty. It's got that real kind of comfortable grand touring Mercedes feel. It's just a nicely resolved package. Like I say, it's not as exciting to drive as the Jaguar. It's not as fun to drive as the Jaguar, but there's surprising agility there. Like I say, the steering's got nice turning. It's good grip. Yes, you start to feel the mass as you lean on the chassis, but it doesn't feel quite as heavy as the Audi. In fact, it doesn't feel as heavy as the small difference in weight would have you believe. It is billed as a luxury SUV, and it feels like that. It feels a bit like an S-Class, but an electric SUV version of an S-Class. It's not as big. I mean, it's the biggest here. There's the most space in the back. Boot's the biggest. It is the most sensible family car, if that's what you're looking for. But it's also the one that's most rounded in its approach. Yes, it's slightly conservative to look at, but I guess that's the market. Those are the buyers. Just a really nice thing. Loads of performance. Really poised. The damping is lovely. There's some thuds, bit of jolting over really nasty potholes, but the rest of the time, as I say, just wafts along, composed. It's nice. Now the battery, 80 kilowatt hour in this one, so it's the smallest battery. The range, Mercedes claimed 255, so I got in this morning. Range was 169 miles, which is some way off that 255 miles, but I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt because it was very cold this morning. Range resilience is pretty good actually. It doesn't lose miles from its range as quickly as the Jag does, and we're doing pretty similar speeds, similar things. What it does mean is that it's the quickest to charge, not by much, but on a 150 kilowatt charger, similar sort of 40 minutes. But if you've got a wall box, 7 kilowatt wall box, plug it in overnight, 11 hours, so 3 hours less than the Audi. Means you don't get as long a line, maybe. Maybe that's a bad thing, I don't know. The rest of the car, it's a really nicely rounded package. It doesn't do anything outlandish. It doesn't look as distinctive as the Jag. It doesn't have novelty door mirrors like the Audi. It doesn't have the Audi's powered charging flat, which, well, that's a bit of a disappointment, I have to say. That is my highlight. I like that a lot. But as something to live with, if it fits in with your lifestyle, if you can plug it in at home, charge it frequently, this is, I'm going to say it, I'm going to go on a limb now. It's not a limb. This is the best luxury EV SUV by this much. I would be torn between this and the Jaguar. The Jaguar is great fun to drive, and if I could live with its less practical mien and its less resilient range, the Jaguar would be my choice for driving. But as an all-rounder, as I say, by that much, I think the Mercedes just nicks it.
If you enjoyed this video, click the like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another Autocar video.